Now on to Raatz. YouTuber Johannes Raatz made a video responding to the Messianic Manic's critique of William Lane Craig's argument for substance dualism. Raatz is not a dualist, but he critiqued the Messianic Manic's use of a computer analogy to argue that information cannot be embodied in physical systems. He says that computers can only manipulate syntax, so they cannot be about anything, as William Lane Craig puts it. Now, you probably didn't catch it, but Raatz is engaging in the same subtle perspectival switching as IP. We are conscious to understand what a computer is doing and model it as information. If an advanced race of robots were introduced to the human species for the first time, they would say that humans only exchange noises, not meaning, so those noises can't be said to be about anything. Granted, humans are conscious entities while computers are not. However, the meaning of information is not something that exists unto itself. In the picture see here, all you see are symbols on a web page. Some you may understand, and others you may not. But the understanding of the symbols is necessarily the work of the conscious mind reading them, not something that exists in the symbols themselves.
Suppose, for example, I give you the following two logical statements. 1. If I see parrotfish, I will see blue. 2. If I see albatrosses, I will see white. Both of these statements can be written out symbolically in the same if P then Q format, and both can be represented by the same sequence of truth values in a truth table like this. These truth values are, of course, no different than the ones and zeros in a computer program, and from them we can compute various things about the system. But here's the problem. They're just syntax. But syntax doesn't actually mean anything. In this case, the syntax for Q is what corresponds to the blue in the first statement and the white in the second statement. So if what Messianic Manic is saying is true, then blue is the same color as white, and is also the same thing as anything else you could put into Q. But of course that's not true, which is why we were able to be about things rather than simply manipulate syntax in our brains. Computers can't do this, however. Computers only manipulate syntax.
The problem with this objection is that the example he gave is a logical statement that the computer will follow according to the axioms and theorems of Boolean logic. The computer's following of these rules will happen regardless of what information is plugged into the statements. The genuine example to give would be in terms of RGB color values. The RGB system is a mathematical model that adds together red, blue, and green to produce a broad range of colors. Red, blue, and green correspond to the colors processed by the cone cells in our eyes. Although a computer cannot distinguish between the truth tables Raatz presented, it can distinguish between values in the RGB color model. From here, Raatz goes on to say that the ones and zeros in a computer are neither blue nor white. But what should they be? Blue and white aren't adjectives that describe objects. They are descriptions of how the mind processes different wavelengths of light. The proximal stimulus that delivers the wavelengths of light to our visual cortex is neither blue nor white, but allows for conscious percepts that we describe as blue, white, or any other color. The aboutness of something is something that we ascribe to a particular object. The aboutness is not objective, however. For example, ask yourself what color this is. What color is this? And what color is this? You may be surprised, but the first two colors are not the same, although you probably describe them as such. However, the Himba people of Namibia would be able to tell the difference between the first two colors, but not the difference between those and the third. This is because their language has different words for different shades of green to distinguish between grass, certain fruits, leaves, and certain vegetables. And what we call blue is actually a different shade of their green.
They clearly describe color differently, but do they see the same way? Serge has been running experiments to find out.
Okay, now you look at these new 12 squares. One of them again has a different color. Which one?
He's testing how long it takes them to spot a color which is different from the others.
Now. Can you do the same thing again?
This is what they're looking at. For us, it's quite hard to spot the odd one out.
Okay, can you point one more time towards the different color. Very good.
But for the himba, it's easy to see the green, which is different.
So you see, in this particular trial, this green patch looks very much like the other ones, at least to me, and I think to most other Westerners. Whereas for the himba, this is a different color. Well, they have a different word for this type of green compared to the other types of green. And that allows them to more easily distinguish between these two colors when they're next to each other. Whereas for her, it is very hard. So when Westerners do this exact same trial, they will spend much longer and they will be much more likely to make a mistake than the himba.
The next experiment is trickier for the himba. In this one, they are shown a circle of green squares, which includes one blue square.
So again, 12 colors, and you point towards the one that is different from the other 11 colors.
For us, we have separate words for green and blue. But as the himba have the same word for both, it takes them longer to spot the blue.
Can't see it.
Okay, that was a difficult one for him. The difference between the two categories of color is very close to each other. For us, it's quite clear the one that is different, but for them, they have to look very hard. We measure the time they take to give the response, as well as errors. And what we find is that the himba will take much longer to find the different color in this version of the experiment with blue and green.
For another good argument against computers having mental states, I will refer you to John Searle's Chinese room argument in the description. It argues along the same lines that syntax is not semantics, though it puts you in the place of the computer in such a way that you can very readily see that you cannot understand Chinese simply by understanding the syntax of Chinese.
Of the many problems with John Searle's Chinese room argument, the most problematic one is that he leaves out a very important aspect of understanding language: associativity. Within the field of linguistics, associativity is mainly a combination of deixis and indexicality. Deixis is a contextualizer for specific words, as semantic meaning is not the same thing as denotational meaning. Indexicality works the same way. Usage of a specific word engineers the state of affairs that one is supposed to envision when those words are communicated to that person. The usage of the word now implies a sense of time in the present. Smoke coming from a house serves as an indexicality for a fire taking place inside. An exit sign with an arrow pointing in a specific direction serves as an indexicality for the direction of the exit. In fact, there's actually a great example of this from history. Ancient Hebrew texts were composed in a writing system called abjad. Abjad is a consonantal text written from right to left that was prevalent in the Phoenician, Arabic, Ugaritic, and other Semitic languages. That's right, ancient Hebrew possessed neither vowels nor punctuation nor spacing between words. Rather, it was up to the reader, who would be a part of that particular group or tribe, to supply the appropriate vowel, as the texts and writings were never meant to go beyond those who were part of their culture. This becomes readily unfortunate when we run into artifacts like the Tel Dan Stela and can't decipher the meaning, both because of the abjad writing system and the lack of deictic elements of the text needed for a good interpretation. However, attempts to correct the system were made by Jewish scholars known as the Masoretes from the 5th to 10th century CE, who set up a guide system for Hebrew pronunciation and vowel notation. Searle's Chinese room argument does not include the associative elements of language that are required for understanding it in the system of the tent. Look at these sequences of letters and try to interpret them. The first one is meant to say, Mary had a little lamb. The second one is meant to say, thank goodness. And the third one, well, I'll let you chew on that for a while. But you get the idea. We learn how to make proper association between words based on our culture. This is why when you enter the text hot dog into Google, you get a tasty treat often served at basketball games and baseball games, and not a literal canine engulfed in flames. The betterment of computational associativity is the goal of a field of computer science known as machine learning, and we are already making progress in this field with the advent of computer vision, image processing, more precise searching algorithms, and optical character recognition. The only difference is that humans are conscious of their association and computers are not, but neither are babies of their associations during the first 15 to 24 months after they've been born. Raatz then goes on to say that there's nothing about dead matter that can indicate subjective experience, but Descartes would have said the same thing about machines playing chess. We don't know enough about the brain to allow for artificial intelligence of the level of being human, but that's not evidence that such technology is impossible. All it represents is our current lack of knowledge concerning what consciousness and subjective experience really are. Raatz then goes on to support his view with his usual string of misrepresentations of quantum mechanics and the observer effect, and his view that reality can be emergent from information, which in itself is a contradiction because information is cast onto reality, not the other way around, as I showed in the example with DNA. He quotes Sam Harris out of context in order to show that simple introspection proves the immateriality of the mind.
There's nothing about introspection that leads you to sense that your subjectivity is at all dependent or even related to voltage changes and chemical interactions going on inside your head. Okay, you can feel, you can drop acid, you can meditate for a year, you can do whatever you want to perturb your nervous system. You can feel yourself to be one with the universe, and at no point in that transformation do you get a glimpse that there's 100 trillion neurons in your head, or synapses in your head that are doing anything.
Well, in response to this, I want you to consider a simple thought experiment. A group of sailors get stranded on an island that has not yet been discovered. They are met by peaceful natives who see that they have a working television. However, this is the first time the natives have ever seen a working television, and they actually believe that there are people inside the small box. There's nothing about seeing these people behind a screen, seeing them move about with such ease, that leads them to sense that what's going on inside the box is at all dependent or even related to cathode ray tubes, electron beams, and phosphor-coated screens. They can hear the people in the TV talk, see them ride horses, and even see them on a boat, and at no point will it seem like this has anything to do with electrical activity behind a screen. Does this mean that the images themselves can be divorced from the TV? With the main objections to materialism addressed and the problems evident in non-physicalist and pluralistic philosophies of ontology in mind, how does the record look for those who espouse those views? Well, I'll use a quote from the Bible.